All right, Shavuos, good morning. Let's begin. Today's daf is daf Zayin. We are picking up Emirat Hashem on Vav Amud Beis with a beautiful daf ahead of us today. Our shir is dedicated today and this month by Sammy and Malka Esterson in memory of their parents, Ludwig Stiefel, Yitzchak Leib and Aaron Acoin, and Hinda Esterson, Hinda Bas Hanach Ephraim. We hope that on the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshamas will have an aliyah and the families in Nechama. So let's begin. So now we're beginning on Vav Amud Beis 6b, and we're beginning at Tan Rabbanan. A beautiful Gemara ahead of us today. It is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 lines up from the bottom. So it says the Gemara, Tan Rabbanan. As sheyish ba yediyah betchilas. Remember again, the Mishnah spoke about the idea that if there is yediyah betchila and yediyah besof. So ultimately, again, speaking in the realm of Tumah, if there is yediyah betchila, in other words, I had an awareness that I became tamei, and then what happens? I either went ahead and ate some type of sacrificial or consecrated item, or I entered into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah, and I did not realize that I did so at the time. Then later on, I realized my mistake. So the halacha is that's called yediyah betchila, yediyah besof halam dein saim. So the Mishnah told me that's harizeh ba'olev yored. So both say the halacha is that is atoned for with a carbon olev yored. That interesting carbon that has a variable price tag depending on my personal financial circumstances. So says the Gemara Tan Rabbanan. How do I know that when the pasuk talks about a carbon olev yored, they were talking about someone who accidentally ate consecrated items or entered into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah, but was not aware of their transgression at the time? How do I know that? So the Gemara says, "V'dinhu." Gemara says, "It's a kal v'chomer," or I should say, we learn out from an argument. Howi over his here va'anash al tumah v'chayiv carbon al tumah. So we'll say if the Torah goes ahead and warned us and punished us regarding tumah. Now, if you look at Rashi, it's the last of the short lines of Rashi. Hoil v'hizir v'anash al azadan tumah v'chayav carbon al shigagas tumah mamatzinu keshehizir v'anash kares al zadon tumah b'tumas mikdash v'kadashav hizir v'anash lo yitamu es mikdashi hareza as haras mikdash. So we'll say. So the Gemara says over here like this: the Torah warns us. The Torah warns someone about tumah entering into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah, the chayiv carbon ala tumah, and told you that if you enter into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah, one will be chayiv for that. Ma kishehizir ve'anash ala tumah. So just like when the Torah goes ahead and warns and ultimately punishes regarding tumah, lo hizir ve'anash ella al tumas mikdash v'kadashav. So we'll say the same way that if a person chas v'shalom goes ahead and accidentally violates either the Kodesh when he enters into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of Tumah, or goes ahead and eats consecrated items in a state of Tumah, and does the Peshogeg, they're Chayiv. Lo hisir va'anash ela tumas mikdash v'kadashav, af kishechayiv karban ala tumah, lo chiyiv ela al tumas mikdash v'kadashav. So we'll say the same idea over here, I'm sorry, not Peshogeg, but the same way that the Torah punishes ultimately again with an Isser Kares. If a person intentionally goes ahead and enters into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of Tumah, or eats consecrated items in a state of Tumah, if one does that intentionally, the punishment is Kares. So too, again, if a person does it b'shogeg, one will be chayiv a carbon, or I should say differently. So too, when one is chayiv b'shogeg, one is chayiv b'shogeg for carbon olev v'yored, in the event that one goes ahead and eats of sacrificial items or consecrated items, or enters into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah. So we'll say, in other words, what the Gemara is saying over here is the following: What we do know is that if one intentionally goes ahead and eats either carbonic or consecrated items in a state of tumah, or one intentionally enters into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah, there is a chiyuv kares. So just like the chiyuv when one is a mazid is on mikdash and kodshim, is on ultimately entering into the Beis Hamikdash and consuming consecrated items, so too b'shogeg one will be chayiv a carbon olev v'yored if one does those same things as well. Ve'ema truma his here va'anash. But one second, maybe ultimately again we're talking about truma. Maybe again when the pasuk refers to liability, maybe it's referring to truma, and ultimately again the his here va'anash, we're ultimately again where ultimately, again, the Torah does give us a warning for one who goes ahead and consumes truma in a state of tumah. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Because the pasuk says that you can't eat kachim if you are in a state of tumah, and truma is included in the general under the general umbrella of kachim. Midichsiv ba ba'hi inyana uba shemesh v'taher va'achar yochal min hakachim or hakadashim. Marina b'yavam is b'truma kach. So also says the Gemara. Maybe when we say that you're going to be chayav a carbon ola v'yored, ultimately again for inadvertent violation of something in terms of tumah, it's referring to truma. That if I go ahead and I inadvertently eat truma in a state of tumah, that's not chayav a carbon ola v'yored. Who says that it applies to eating other consecrated items or entering into the base of mikdash? To which the Gemara says, "Lo ashkichan avon misa techayiv alei carbon." Here's the difference: is we don't find something ultimately again where if one were to do it, they would be chayiv misa v'dei shamayim intentionally, or they would, if one were to do it intentionally, they would be chayiv misa v'dei shamayim, and if they did it unintentionally, they'd be chayiv a carbon olav yored. Ema hani mili carbon kavua. So say maybe that only applies to something that has a fixed carbonic obligation. Aval was top of Zion. Aval carbon olav yored nesi. But maybe again, ultimately, you should be chayav a carbon olav yored. Midi dahava ashmias kol va'abitui svasayim. Because it should be no different than the case of shmias kol and bitui svasayim. We'll say, what are those cases? Take a look at the tab Rashi. Midi dahava shmias kol Shevuos ha'edus u'Shevuos bitui. So we'll say Shevuos ha'edus means a shvuah. A person takes an oath that he does not know testimony for a particular case. Or Shevuos bitui, which is the shvuah we refer to in the Mishnah, which is a shvuah ultimate, just an utterance shvuah. A person makes a declarative statement. The isnu nami b'carbon olav yored. Because I will say these are both things where if you violate them, you also have to bring a carbon olav yored, and yet the ein onish al zadonan lo misa v'lo kares. So we'll say, what do you see from here? The fact that if you violate a Shevuos bitui or a Shevuos ha'edus, you have to bring a carbon olav yored tells you what? That carbon olav yored is not reserved only for things that carry a death penalty. So we'll say, just understand what's happening over here. And everybody wants to understand what's happening over here. So remember, the Mishnah told me that I have to bring a carbon olav yored in the event that I accidentally entered into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah, or I consumed consecrated items in a state of tumah as well. Now again, it's a very specific case. I was aware that I was tamei, I forgot that I was tamei, ate sacrificial items or consecrated items or entered into the Beis Hamikdash. At the time I did that, I forgot that I was tamei, and then I remember that I was tamei at a later time. Says the Mishnah, then I bring a carbon olav yored. All the Gemara is trying to figure out is, how do you know that the liability for olav yored is in the case of tumas mikdash v'kadashav? Maybe at the end of the day, the liability for carbon olav yored is in a case of where a person consumes truma. In other words, how do you know that it's dafka mikdash v'kadashav? That's what we're trying to work on over here. So the Gemara says over here, the Gemara says it has to be because, again, when it comes to truma, so truma is not chayiv misa ultimately with the shamayim, and therefore, again, if one did it intentionally, and therefore one wouldn't be chayiv a carbon olav yored if one did it unintentionally. To which the Gemara says, well, 1 second, we have other examples of things which are not punishable, again, by kares, which are still chayiv a carbon olav yored. For example, one who violates different Shevuos. To which the Gemara says, "Midi dehavash shmias kol v'abitui svasayim." Amakra, we'll say second line, Zayin Amud Aleph. Amakra, the pasuk says ba. So pasuk says, we'll say ba. The ba is ki o ki yiga b'tumas adam l'chol tumasa sheyitma ba. So ba lemeute truma. So we'll say ba comes to exclude truma. That the only time one is chayiv ultimately again for carbon olav yored is if one is going ahead and consuming other consecrated or sacrificial items in a state or in a lapse of tumah awareness, but not truma. So ba lemeute truma, ema ba lemeute mikdash. So why don't you say ba comes to exclude mikdash? That if one enters into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah, he won't be chayav a carbon olav yored. Delo sagile be carbon olav yored ad demaisi carbon kavua. Then maybe again, Rabbi say, if a person goes ahead and enters into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah, maybe that's such a severe transgression that bringing a carbon olav yored is not enough. Rather, one does not achieve kapara up until the point that one brings what's called a carbon kavua, a real carbon. Kari Rava alei de Rebbe. So we'll listen to this. So Rava was very impressed by this, and therefore again he said about Rebbe, Dole mayim miboros amukim. Rebbe, you are a man who draws water from deep wells. So we'll say that is a Talmudic compliment. You are a man who draws water from deep wells. The idea is anyone could draw water from a surface well, right, from a shallow well, but you are someone who's able to draw out water even from deep wells. So Lama Nemra, Behema. I skipped the line. Ditanya. Rabbi Omer. Rabbi said the following. Rabbi Omer. Akra Omer. Akra anichaya behema. Akra anichaya behema lama nemra. So it says Rabbi the following. The pasuk already mentions chaya. So why is there need ultimately again to go ahead and bring up behema? We'll say look at Rashi for just a moment, just to give you context. Ekra anichaya. The carbon ola v'yored. So both say in the section dealing with the carbon ola v'yored, which can both say is the carbon that is dependent on your financial situation. So the ksiv onivlas chaya temea, oniv benivlas behema temea. V'dai im hayisi kore benivlas chaya temea, shenichtav rishon. Follow hayatzarach lachzar v'lichtov behema, shrei behema b'chal chaya. So we'll say, so now the Gemara says the following. Rabbi says, when it comes to the pasuk of the carbon ola v'yored, it speaks about again if a person comes in contact with the carcass of a chaya or a behema, and a person then becomes tameh, and a person then gets involved either with going into the Beis HaMikdash, or ultimately again consuming consecrated items, they have to bring the carbon ola v'yored. So Rabbi says, I don't understand. If you're already telling me about the carcass of the chaya, why they need to tell me about the carcass of the behema? In other words, I don't need the Torah to teach me both. Lama ne'emra. So the which thing I'll tell you why. Rabbi says, I'll tell you why. Ne'emra kan behema tameya. It says over here behema tameya. V'ne'emar lahalan behema tameya. And it says later on behema tameya. So we'll say ma lahalan tumas kodesh. Just like over there in the second pasuk. So the behema tameya is talking about someone who went ahead, touched a behema tameya, and then entered into the Beis HaMikdash. Therefore again, afkan tumas kodesh. So too in the first pasuk of carbon ola v'yored, it's also talking about someone who went ahead and touched an animal carcass and then entered into the Beis HaMikdash in a state of tumah. So ashkechon tumas kodesh. So I understand now. So we'll say now I understand that Lamaisa again, if one was tameh, entered into the Beis HaMikdash in a state of tumah, was unaware of their tumah at the time they entered, that they'll be chayav carbon ola v'yored. Ashkechon tumas kodesh. Excuse me. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. That was let me just say that again. Excuse me. Just like the second pasuk I was talking about, if one goes in and becomes tameh and then consumes consecrated items, one will be chayav carbon ola v'yored. So to the earlier pasuk was also referring to the idea that if one touches something tameh and then consumes consecrated items, they will also be chayav carbon ola v'yored. So now the Gemara says ashkechon tumas kodesh. So we'll say, just follow this train of thought for just a moment. Here's what we've established. What we've established now is that one will be chayav a carbon ola v'yored if one goes ahead and becomes tameh and then consumes consecrated items. So at this point in time, that's what we know. I go ahead, I become tameh, I go ahead and I consume something consecrated, whatever it is, karbanos, anything else, I am now chayav a carbon ola v'yored. Okay. So ashkechon tumas kodesh. Tumas mikdash minolan. They both say, from where do we know that if I become tameh and enter into the Beis HaMikdash, that I will be chayiv for carbon ola v'yored? Amakra, b'chol kodesh lo siga, v'ala mikdash lo savo. The pasuk says that when a person becomes tameh, he may not go ahead. Actually, this is actually talking about by tazria by yoledas. That's when he gives birth. But she's tameya. B'chol kodesh lo siga. She may not touch anything that is consecrated. Ve'el hamikdash lo savo. And she may not come to the Beis HaMikdash. So what do we see from here? Iskish mikdash lekodesh. Ultimately, again, we see a connection between the mikdash, between again the Beis HaMikdash, or entry into the Beis HaMikdash, and kodesh. In other words, I will say that anyone essentially again who is prohibited from consumption of consecrated items may also not what? May also not enter into the Beis HaMikdash. Therefore, again, Abosai, once we have established that one who goes ahead and consumes consecrated items in a state of tumah, again, and is unaware of their state of tumah at the time of consumption, will be chayiv a carbon ola v'yored. So too, one who enters into the Beis HaMikdash while in a state of tumah, yet unaware of their tumah, will also be chayiv a carbon ola v'yored. Ihachi trumanami. If that's the case, then for Truma, the halacha should be the same. That if one goes ahead and consumes Truma in a state of Tumah and was unaware of their Tumah, they should be chayav a carbon olevi ored. The Amar Mar b'chol kodesh lo siga l'rabo says Truma, because the pasuk Mar said that when it says b'chol kodesh lo siga, that the Yoled, that's the one who gave birth, may not touch all kodesh. That comes to include Truma. To which the Gemara says no. Hamiet rachmana ba. So we'll say that's the difference, that we have an exclusionary statement. The word ba comes to exclude Truma from this entire formula. Ema ba lemeute mikdash. So maybe ba comes to exclude Abosai mikdash. Maybe ba comes to exclude that if you enter into the base of mikdash in a state of Tumah, you will not be chayav a carbon olav yored. Nistabra mikdash lo mematinan. The Abosai would appear that mikdash is not excluded. Why? Shekain bekares kamosa. Because ultimately, again, there is a similar case, ultimately, again, of Shekain Bakaris Kamosa means that one who eats Kodesh B'tumah is similar to it as well. Adirabba, Truma lo mematinon. I would say just the opposite. Let's not exclude Truma. Shekain Achila Kamosa. Because ultimately, again, I will say the case of Kodesh consumption B'tumah will be just like it. Rather, Rava says the following. We'll say, so again, remember, we're just trying, we have one singular goal over here, which is we're just trying to figure out. The Mishnah told me that if I go ahead and I consume consecrated items in a state of Ha'elam Tumah, I knew that I was Tameh when I became Tameh. I remember later on, but at the state when I went ahead and I consumed Shumar and entered into the Beis HaMikdash, I forgot. Mishnah said I'm chayav a carbon olav v'yored for that. We're just trying to figure out how we know that. So it says the Gemara, Amar Rava. Rava said, Shalosh krisos b'shlamin lama. So we'll say, rather, Rava says the following. The Torah mentions kares 3 times by shlamim. Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Shalosh krisos b'shlamim. It's almost right across. Ba'ochlan b'tuma. So we'll say the Torah mentions kares 3 times in conjunction with consumption of shlamim. Achaz ba'emar alakonim kol isha sheyikrav mikol zarachem alakotshim. Farmina bezvachem parakravi taha yikrav achilahu umau yikrav beroi lakrava shakodesh shehukdosh bekli ushtayim b'tzav. Fine. So the Torah speaks about kares 3 times in conjunction with shlamim. Why is that? So the Gemara says lama achos leklal va'achos leprat. So we'll say one is for the klal. What does this mean? Take a look at Rashi. Achos leklal hahiv de'alakotshim shekol lasakol va'achos v'shtayim leprat. Umidazun just throws kanim betchilas sefer. Dover shay bechlal v'yotzam leklal alamed. Keitzad v'nefer shatochim misvit a few more lines. Mibash zevach hashlamim v'alo shlamim bechlal kol hakotshim hayu v'lama yatzu lahakish eilehem. Mashlamim miyuchadin kotshim izbeach av kol kotshim izbeach. Yatzu kotshim v'dekabayish and chayav lem mishum tumah. So we'll say number 1. Kares 1 teaches me that just like shlamim, if you eat it intentionally in a state of tumah, you'll be chayav kares. So too all karbanos. If you go ahead and you eat them, intentionally eat them in a state of tumah, you will be chayiv kares. V'achas leprat. And I will say one is specifically to teaching you about the case of shlamim, that if you go ahead and you consume shlamim in a state of tumah, one will be chayiv for that. V'achas l'tumah haksuva b'torah. And I will say v'achas tumah ksuv b'torah stam. And I will say one kares is to teach me about all karbanos. That all karbanos, if you intentionally consume them in a state of tumah, you will be chayiv. Second kares is to teach you specifically about shlamim. And the third one, va'achas l'tumah ksuva b'torah stam. And I will say one of them is just to address tumah that is written in the Torah stam. Ve'eni yodea maihi. And I don't know what that is referring to. Sahavi Omer, tumas kodesh. I might have thought that what it's referring to is a person unintentionally consumes consecrated items in a state of tumah. That if he would have intentionally done it, he would have been chayiv kares. Unintentionally carbon olav yored. And if I don't need to learn out tumas kodesh because we already learned that out from the Josh of Rabbi above, so the Gemara says teneu inyan tumas mikdash. Ultimately, again, use it to teach me about Tumas Mikdash, entering into the Beis HaMikdash in a state of Tumah. But 1 second, we need this drasha for Rabbi Avo, because what did Rabbi Avo say? Dam Rabbi Avo, Shalosh Krisos B'Shlamim Lama. Why is it that Kares was mentioned 3 times in the context of Shlamim? So the Gemara says, Achos Liklal. 1 was to teach you that all karbanos, if intentionally consumed in a state of tumah, there'll be a chiyuv kares. V'achas leprat, and one is to teach me ultimately again about shalom specifically. V'achas ledvarim she'inam ne'achalin. And I will say one is to teach me that there's a chiyuv kares even for things that are not normally consumed. I will say, what does that mean? If you take a look at the second to last of the intermediate lines in Rashi, ledvarim she'inam ne'achalin, kigon eitzim shal ma'aracha, for example, like wood, ukitora ulavona, the frankincense, ukitores, the incense, im achlan betuma chayiv. We'll say if you ate any of these things which are normally inedible, then what? One would still be chayiv. So we'll say amazing. The Rabbi Shimon would say, the Amar dvarim she'nechalin in chayav alein kares mishum tuma. So the Gemara says, if that's, but according to Rabbi Shimon, it says the dvarim she'nechalin in chayav alein kares mishum tuma. But according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that one is not chayiv for consuming inedible things, le'suye chatos hapnimios. That extra kares, Rabbi say, that kares mishum tuma comes to include what? Le'suye chatos hapnimios. We'll say that comes to include chatos offerings that are offered inside of the Beis HaMikdash. That if one intentionally goes ahead and eats them in a state of tumah, that one will be chayiv kares. Why doing a special drasha for those karbanos? I would have thought hoil va'amar Reb Shimon kol shena karev al mizbeach hachitzon kishlamim ein chayav alei mishum pigul mishum tumah nami. Because I would have thought the following: Reb Shimon says that any karban which is not offered on the outside mizbeach, like shlamim, one is not chayiv on it because of pigul. Both remember again what's pigul. So pigul is a kohen. It's actually an amazing thing. If a kohen has a thought while offering up the karban to do something wrong with the karban, let's say the karban could only be consumed for 1 day and 1 night, and he has in mind to go and consume it on the second day. His thoughts have the ability to disqualify the karban. Shabbos Shimon says any karban which is not offered on the outside mizbeach like shlamim, one will not be chayiv because of pigul. Right. So in other words, pigul apparently only takes effect on karbanos offered up on the outside mizbeach. To which the Gemara says, mishum pigul, mishum tumanami lo. So I would have thought also the same halacha applies because of tumah. Maybe any karban not offered up on the outside mizbeach is also not subject to the laws of tumah. So therefore, again, the chatos offerings of Yom Kippur, which are offered up on the inside, maybe they're not subject to these laws of tumah. In other words, that if you consume it in a state of tumah, intentionally chayiv kares, unintentionally carbon olav yored. Kamash molano demechayiv. Kamash will say that even though they're offered up on the inside, one would still be chayiv for consuming them in a state of tumah. Elo amri nardoim mishmei de Rava. Rather, I will say the nardoim said the name of Rava. Shalosh tumos b'shlamim lama. So we'll say, why is it that, what do we do with the 3 mentions of tumah by shlamim? Achos leklal. So we'll say, one is to teach me a general idea that any karbanos consumed in a state of tumah, one will be chayiv for. Achos leprat. One is to teach me specifically about shlamim itself. Va'achos letumah haksuva b'torah stam. And I will say, one is referring to the tumah that's written in the Torah in an unqualified sense, or unqualified tumah in the Torah. Ve'ini yodea mahi. I don't know what that's referring to. Havi Omer Tumas Kodesh. I'm at the will say maybe it's referring to a person who enters into the Beis HaMikdash in a state of tumah. A person who consumes consecrated items in a state of tumah. Tumas Kodesh did not claim it, Rebbe. But if I don't need this pasuk to teach me about Tumas Kodesh, because he already learned it out from the statement of Rabbi above, Tineu le'inyum Tumas Mikdash. So we'll say, tell me that it could be used what? To teach me that if one enters into the Beis HaMikdash in a state of tumah, that one will be chayiv. V'hai nami mi boile. But we need this anyway. Aidi de boile michtav kares lichid Rabbi Avo. Because we'll say, since it's necessary for it to go in and write kares, like we saw before in accordance with Rabbi Avo, ksiv nami tumas de lo sagili belav hachi. Therefore, the Torah also has to write again about the Tmeos, because it would not have been enough without this, in order to ultimately balance off the drush of Kares, according to Rabbi Avo. To which the Gemara says, Elo Amar Rava, Asyo Tumaso Tumaso. Rather, I will say, says Rava, we make a Gzir Shava of Tumaso Tumaso. What's the Gzir Shava? Ksiv Hacha. It says over here, Rashi says, by Olav Yored. It says over here, by Kabin Olav Yored, L'chol Tumaso. So when it comes to Olav Yored, the pasuk says, L'chol Tumaso, for all of his Tumas, Amad Days, Uksiv Hasam. And it says over there, Tame Yihyeh Od Tum Aso Bo. And it says over there, he is tameh. Od tum asamo, his tumah is still in it. Now, take a look at the top Rashi, Zayin days. Ksiv hasam betumas mikdash beparshas para aduma. So it says over there again when it comes to entering into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah. It says again, Tuma yiyeh od tum asobo. So both say. So just to understand what we have over here. So the first pasuk is the chol tumaso is referring ultimately again to the carbon oleviorate. Okay. Then by para aduma, so both say the pasuk in its entirety says kol anogeh b'meis b'nefesh adam asher yamos lo yischata es mishkan Hashem teim v'nichras ha'nefeshim Yisrael ki mei nida lo zarak alav tamei yiyeh od tum aso bo. So we'll say, what is the Torah saying? That until a person has been sprinkled with the ashes of the para aduma, so what happens? They can't enter into the Beis Hamikdash. To see what's happening over here? We'll say again, remember, I know it's a bit confusing, but all we're trying to focus on over here is trying to figure out how to prove the statement of the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that if I go ahead and I have tumah awareness, then a lapse of awareness, and during that lapse of awareness, I either A, consume consecrated items, or B, enter into the Beis Hamikdash in a total lapse of awareness, and then after the fact, sometime later on, I remember what I did, that I'm chayiv a carbon ola v'yorei. So the fact that is true by consumption of consecrated items, that we've already proven. What we're now still trying to prove is, how do I know that it's true for entering the Beis Hamikdash in a state of a lapse of tum awareness? How do I know that's true? The Gemara is now suggesting we're learning out from Gzeir Shava. By the Ikar Pasuk of carbon ola v'yorei, it says, L'chol tumaso. By para aduma, when speaking about the idea that somebody who is tamei mace, right, requires the ashes of the para aduma, it says he cannot enter into the Beis Hamikdash od tamei yiyeh od tumaso bo. He uses the same word by carbon ola v'yored and the same word prohibiting entry into the Beis Hamikdash. Ma lahalon tumas mikdash. Just like by paraduma, it's referring to the prohibition to enter into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah. Afkan tumas mikdash. So too by carbon ola v'yorei, the pasuk is also making reference that you cannot enter into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah. Ve'ela ba lamali. If that's the case, what does the ba come to teach me? Ve'elaba lamali l'rabos nevelas of tahor. We'll say, so what does ba come to exclude? What does ba come to teach me? It comes to include nevelas of tahor, the carcass of a kosher bird. What does that mean? Take a look at Rashi, third line down from the top. L'rabos nevelas of tahor hamitame bebeis habliya shimachla v'nichnas lamikdash chayev. So we'll say, there's actually an interesting halacha. The halacha is that a kosher bird that dies without shchita, that's called a nevela. The nevela of an oftahar has the ability to make someone tameh. But interestingly enough, the only way it conveys tumah is how? Is by ingesting it. Only if you eat it. Once you go ahead and you swallow it, it makes you chayiv. So therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, if you were to swallow nevelas of tahar and enter into the Beis Hamikdash, one would be chayiv for entering into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah. To which the Gemara says, ha amrit ba miuta. But I don't understand. You just said before that what? You just said before that ba is a miut, Rabbi say. That ba is an exclusionary phrase, not an inclusionary phrase. To which the Gemara says, ha amrit ba miutahu mishum de miutahu iyaiser. So I'll say ultimately again because it is a miut mishum de miutahu iyaiser. At the end of the day, look at Rashi. Mishum de miutahu di iyaiser miut zeh balarabos kid the mafarish va'azil. This Rabbi Bein Nevelas of Tar. So it says we're going to see in just a little bit. This is a miut. It's true. Ba normally is an exclusionary phrase. However, in this context, it actually acts as a miut. So the Gemara says ksiv because look what happens. Ksiv o kiyiga de bar negia. So we'll say the pasuk says o kiyiga. Ultimately, and if a person will go ahead and touch something tamei, the pasuk says o kiyiga betumas adam lachol tumaso yitma. So the bar negia. So the bar negia in the lav bar negia lo. So we'll say, so apparently again, one could only contract tumah if it's something you can touch, but something you don't touch, you don't get tamei. Uksiv ba miuta. So we'll say, then it says afterwards ba, which is also a miyut. So we'll say you have two miyuts. Ha-miyut achar miyut. It's one miyut after another miyut, one exclusionary phrase after another. They miyut achar miyut el l'ravos. And ultimately, again, we'll say whenever you have one miyut after the other miyut, then what? That comes to include. Therefore, again, we'll say I have the miyut of ba, the miyut of, or I should say the miyut of okiyiga, then the miyut of ba. So we'll say miyut achar miyut, two exclusionary phrases or two limiting phrases, which therefore by definition together come to include. What do they come to include, Rabbi say? They come to include ultimately again the velas of Tamei. So we'll say, so what is the takeaway, right? What is we're not finished, right? Don't breathe yet. So it's a little bit, it's good. We'll say, again, the truth is, remember, the beautiful part is the Gemara is just working through this. The nice part about this is we know the conclusion already, because the conclusion is stated in the Mishnah, nobody's arguing on it. We'll say what we know now, and what we've successfully proven, is that halacha l'maisa, in the case of Yediyah b'tchila and Yediyah b'sof, which is a case of, I knew I became Tamei, I forgot. During that lapse of awareness, I did one of two things, which is either I either consumed consecrated items, or B, I entered into the Beis HaMikdash. At the time of the commission of that wrongful act, I was unaware of my tumah. Sometime later, I remember that I am Tamei. What is the liability? The liability for that is a carbon ola v'yoret, what we'll call the variable offering. This idea of carbon that depends on my financial situation. So we'll say all we've done through this entire sugya is just ultimately again try to prove that a dafka applies in this case and not in other cases like truma, and the Gemara has successfully done that. Shkoya. Let's go back there. Says the Gemara. What was the next case in the Mishnah? Yesh ba yediyah b'tchila ve'in ba yediyah b'sof sir naseh b'fnim. So we'll say the next case in the Mishnah was the following. This was yesh ba yediyah b'tchila ve'in ba yediyah b'sof. We'll say which means what? A person has awareness that he became Tamei. He then has a lapse of awareness. The same case either goes into the Beis HaMikdash or consumes consecrated items. But we'll say what's the chap in this case? The chap in this case is he's operating still in an ongoing lapse. You know what I'm saying? Some people live their entire life in an ongoing lapse of awareness, right? They were aware at some point in time, their awareness lapsed, and they continue to trudge along in a halum, in a fog. So that's our case over here. So we'll say, what does this guy do? So it sounds like a strange question. Well, if you don't know you did anything wrong, then what are you supposed to do? So we'll say, listen to this. Remember again, the Mishnah said in that case, so we'll say what happens over there is Yom Kippur, specifically the Sir Naseh Bifnim, the goat offering of Yom Kippur, and Yom Kippur itself serve to Tola. Tola means they work on behalf of the individual to suspend judgment against the individual until the point in time that what? That I realize what I did wrong. Then when I realize what I did wrong, I bring a carbon ola v'yorei. So again, Yom Kippur essentially, and I will say, by the way, this could go on for years. But the power of Yom Kippur is Yom Kippur essentially shields me from the punishment of this act. Since again, I'm unaware, shields me, but again, it doesn't atone for me. The only thing that could atone for me is what the carbon ola v'yored. But of course, the only time I can bring the carbon ola v'yored is when I realize that I've done something wrong. So it says the Gemara, Tanur Abanon, v'chiper ala kodesh mitos b'nei Yisrael. So the pasuk says, by Yom Kippur, it shall atone ultimately again by this year. It shall atone. The pasuk says, "V'chiper ala kodesh mitumos b'nei Yisrael." It will atone ultimately again on the kodesh for that which is consecrated. Mitumos b'nei Yisrael. Yeshli be'inyan zeh lahavi shalosh tumos. We'll say we're going to now quote a brisa that I'm probably going to continue with tomorrow, which is quite fascinating. So the pasuk tells me that Yom Kippur. When we say Yom Kippur, that means two things. Number one, the day itself. Number two, the Seir Hana'aseh Bifnim, the goat offering that's offered on the inside, has the ability to atone mitumos b'nei Yisrael, from the impurities of Klal Yisrael. So it says something amazing. Yeshli be'inyan zeh lahavi shalosh tumos. Based on this pasuk, I would say that Yom Kippur itself as a day, and the Seir Hana'aseh Bifnim, the goat offering that was offered up on the inside of the Beis Mikdash, has the ability to affect atonement for the following tumas. Shalosh tumos. Tumas avodah zarah, tumas gila arayos, tumas shvichos damim. They both say maybe the power of Yom Kippur is it doesn't just atone for tumah, right? For ritual impurity, but it atones for the other forms of tumas as well. The tumah of avodah zarah, the tumah idolatry, the tumah of gilarais, immorality, and the tumah of shichos damim, of murder. So the Gemara says, how do you know that these things are called tumah? Ba'avodah zarah hu omer, because by avodah zarah, by idolatry, it says, leman times mikdashi. It says, you have defiled my mikdash, so you see avodah zarah is called tumah. Begilarayos hu omer, ushmartem is mishmarti, levilti asos michukos hatoivos. So the pasuk says by immorality, you shall keep my statutes, in order that you shall not follow in the ways of the abominations. And what does it say afterwards? V'lo sitamu bahem, you shall not become defiled in them. So what do you see from here? You see from here that again, so agilaras, immorality is called tumah as well. B'shvichos damim hu omer, v'lo sitamu es haaretz. So by murder it says you shall not defile the land. So both say you see from what? All three of these things, gilarayos, avodah zarah, shvichos damim, the big three averos, are all called tumah. So I might have thought, Yachal al Gimel Tumas Halol Yisar Mechaber. I might have thought therefore, I will say what? Yom Kippur itself and the Seir Hana Asavifnim. Remember again, the Seir is the sister goat of the one that's tossed off the cliff. So I might have thought that the Seir Hana Asavifnim has the ability to atone for these three tumos as well. Talmud Lomar, Mitumos B'nei Yisrael, Velo Kol Tumos B'nei Yisrael. Oh, listen to this. The pasuk says, such a fascinating diuk. The pasuk says that the seir is mechaper mitumos. We'll say, what does mitumos b'nei Yisrael mean? From the tumos of Klal Yisrael. In other words, it has the ability to atone for some of the tumos, but not all of the tumos. So the Gemara says, Ma masinu shechalak hakasav mechlal kol tumos. So I don't understand why. In other words, why not just go ahead and atone for all of the tumos? Meaning, why is that the pasuk of mechalik? Some tumas yes, other tumas low. Really what the Gemara is asking is, Sanu, if you're telling me that you're mechalik, what kind of tumos does the Seir Nasa Bifnim atone for, and what kind does it not? Have Omer, tumas mikdash v'kadashav. Afkan b'tumas mikdash v'kadashav dir Rabbi Yehuda. So also Rabbi Yehuda will say that l'maisa again, since we see, if you look at Rashi just a moment, ma matzinu shechalak kalomar, Ezu tuma matzina chaluka b'makom acher, tumas mikdash v'kadash v'kamam afarish laheichas. So the Gemara says, well, what kind of tuma have we seen already singled out? And the answer is that type of tumas mikdash v'kadashav, which means entering into the tumah, entering into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah, and consuming consecrated items in a state of tumah. The Torah has already elsewhere singled out these type of tumas. Therefore, it must be that by Yom Kippur, when the Torah says mitumos b'nei Yisrael, that the Seir Nasa Bifnim only atones for certain types of tumos, but not all types of tumos. It must atone for the types of tumos that have already been singled out beforehand, which refers to one who enters into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah, or one who goes in and consumes consecrated items in a state of tumah. Dear Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon says, "Mimkomohu muchra." Rabbi Shimon says you can prove this in the pasuk itself. How so? Harehu Omer. The pasuk itself says, "V'chiper ala kodesh mitumos." So the Gemara says the pasuk says it will atone ultimately again on the kodesh from tumos. Mitumos shel kodesh. Rabbi Shimon Darshan, the pasuk itself explains it. What kind of tumos is Yom Kippur? Is the Seir Nasa Bifnim mechaper for? Mitumos shel kodesh. It is mechaper ultimately again from tumos of kodesh. Ultimately again from types of tumah that are related to kodesh. What are types of tumah related to kodesh? Either again a person who consumes truma, or kodshim in a state of tumah, or a person who enters into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah. Yochal al kol tumah sheba kodesh. Yeisar is mechaper. I might have thought to say that on any type of tumah sheba kodesh, on any type of, look at Rashi, Yochal al kol tumah sheba kodesh, bein sheish ba yediyah, bein shein ba yediyah. So we'll say maybe Yom Kippur is mechaper for everything, whether you have awareness at the beginning or you don't have awareness at the beginning. Talmud lomar umi pishehem lochol chatasam. Therefore, Rabbi the pasuk says no. Yom Kippur is only mechaper for pishehem lochol chatasam. Watch this, Rabbi say now. Pishehem lochol chatasam, Rabbi just so you understand, is employing two different words. A pesha refers to an intentional sin. A chatos refers to an unintentional sin. Chatoim dumya de pishaim. Rabbi say Yom Kippur atones for chatoim, which are inadvertent transgressions that are similar to pishaim, which are intentional transgressions. How can you have a similarity between intentional and unintentional? Rabbi say, watch this. Ma pishaim she'imam b'nei karban. Just like I will say, pesha it cannot be atoned through a carbon. As well say, why can't pesha be atoned through a carbon? Because a pesha is an intentional act, intentional acts are not atoned for through karbanos. Af chatoim she'inon b'nei karban. So too, again, I will say what? So too, the type of chatoim that Yom Kippur is mechaper for are the type of chatoim, ultimately, again, that are not subject to a karban. I will say, what type of chait is not subject, what type of inadvertent act is not subject to a karban? So we'll say, you know this, we learned this in the Mishnah. What type of act? Any case of yein ein ba yediyah betchila. We'll say, remember again, in order to be chayiv a karban ola v'yored, there has to be awareness at the beginning. If there's ein ba yediyah betchila, if there's no awareness at the beginning, then what? Then lemaisa, again, there is no carbonic liability. So also what the Gemara is suggesting over here is something amazing. The Gemara is suggesting so far. So we're trying to figure out what is it that Yom Kippur is mechaper for. So just so you understand where we started. Havamina is Yom Kippur is mechaper for tumos. What does tumos include? Mamish, like not only actual tumah in the mikdash, maybe it also includes what? Kilei arayos, avodah zarah, shirchos. So no, that we limited. Mi tumos. It only atones for certain tumos. So we'll say, what type of tumos does it apply to? Mi pisheem l'chol chatos sam. It applies for the type of chatos, inadvertent acts that are like a pesha. Just like a pesha, an intentional act is not atoned for a karban, so to Yom Kippur is mechaper. Mechaper for things, for a chatos that's like a pesha. Meaning for inadvertent acts that also are not chayv a karban. What's an example of an inadvertent act for which you're not chayv a karban? Ein ba yediyah betchila. There's no awareness at the beginning of the act. Now watch this. We'll say just one more line. Uminayin l'shiyesh ba yediyah betchila ve'ein ba yediyah besof sheseir zetola. We'll say, but what about the following case? Now, we'll say, I want to be clear with our terms. Yom Kippur has the ability to do two things: to be mechaper, to atone, and to be tola. What does tola mean? Suspend divine judgment. So Yom Kippur essentially will protect me from divine punishment up until the time that I realize my transgression and I can make amends for it by bringing the karban. So we'll say, so now what we've just established is Yom Kippur is mechaper for those things for which I can never bring a karban. What's an example for something I can never bring a karban for? In ba yediyah betchila. Now the Gemara says, uminayim l'sheyesh ba yediyah betchila ve'in ba yediyah besof sheseir zetola. How do I say that in a case of yesh ba yediyah betchila? I was aware that I became tamei. I then went ahead and either ate consecrated items or entered into the base of the state of tumah, and I did not know that I was tamei at the time of the transgression, and I still don't know that what I did is wrong. How do I know that Yom Kippur is tola? How do I know that Yom Kippur suspends divine judgment and protects me up until the point in time when I realize my transgression and I can bring my karban olavi? All right, Talmud Lomar l'chol chatosam. Therefore, we'll say the pasuk says, for any of your sins, chayvei chatos b'mashma. Ultimately, again, I will say any case that ultimately again is ra'ui for a karban chatos, Yom Kippur is tola. Therefore, I will say in this case of yesh ba yediyah betchila ve'in ba yediyah besof, one day I will be chayiv chatos. When will I be chayiv chatos? So we'll say when I realize what I did wrong. But up until that point, ultimately, again, Yom Kippur will protect me. So we'll stop over here for today. So just to understand what we've established. What we've established is Yom Kippur has the ability to affect two things. Number one, kapara under certain circumstances. Number two, taliyah, to suspend divine judgment. Kapara is in the case of, we'll say, where a karban is never possible. Where is a karban never possible? Ein ba yediyah betchila. In other cases where a karban is possible, I just have to get to a state of awareness, Yom Kippur will be tola. And Miras Hashem, tomorrow, we're going to pick up and we're going to go back and we're going to revisit that brisa. The brisa that spoke about the havamina that Yom Kippur could be mechaper for Gilei Arayos, avodah zarah, shlichus damim. The Gemara said, no, it can't, because mi tumos, from some of the tumos that could be mechaper, not all the tumos. In Miras Hashem, tomorrow we're going to go back, revisit and challenge that brisa.